cottage town, village, rural city, urban country, urban globe. Connected globe. Since the 1800s, this world has been progressing each and every day as technology advances and information is exchanged. Imagine living in a world where a CPA firm in the United States can file a tax return for a bank in Taiwan, which then revises it and sends it to a customer in England. Imagine living in a world where an idea of a toy doll can be thought of in China, then transferred to a toy factory in Tanzania, which sends copies of the doll to the United States and ends up in the hands of an American child. Fortunately, this world in which countries are connected by means of technology and other forms of communication, a globalized world, is the world today. It is due in part to historical events dating back to the 1800s that we live in such a world. This video will explore previous history from the 1800s to 2000, and how it both hindered and promoted the globalization of the world. Throughout the period known as Globalization 2.0, dating from 1800 to 2000, the globalization shifted its levels of dominance in the world as historical periods hinder and promote its progress. Starting with the Industrial Revolution, globalization was greatly promoted due to extreme advances in various fields and the urbanization of towns. As groups began to form, a sense of national pride arose, and this period became known as the rise of nationalism. The nationalism of countries was hindering to the globalization of the world, as independent states began to form. However, the combination of the need for raw materials from the Industrial Revolution and the patriotic pride from nationalism led to an age of imperialism, when countries colonized weaker lands. This period greatly promoted the globalization of the world as countries were drawn closer. As these countries began competing for the control of more land, rivalries and alliances began to form, which led to the earth-shaking World War I. This war, also known as the Great War, promoted globalization with the formation of alliances and the advancement of technology, and hindered it with the formation of enemies. Next came the interwar period, which included the age of fascism and the Great Depression. Although fascism hindered globalization, the Great Depression did quite the opposite. The Second World War began several years after the Great Depression, and, like World War I, both hindered and promoted the globalization of the world. Within World War II, the Nazis showed their hatred of the Jewish people during a period known as the Holocaust. This period hindered the globalization of the world by means of massacres and hatred of other peoples. Finally, a nearly half-century battle, known as the Cold War, came into play. As countries spread their economic beliefs across the world, countries grew connected by means of common economic structures, and hence the Cold War promoted the globalization of the world. Although it is arguable that the historical periods of nationalism, the Holocaust, and the Cold War hindered the globalizing of the world, many other parts of history promoted globalization and, figuratively, shrunk the world from a size medium to a size small. The Industrial Revolution, a historical period known for enormous advances in technology and communication, clearly promoted the globalization of the world. Before the Industrial Revolution, countries were a part of pre-modern lifestyle, where people lived in rural areas, independent work was important, and countries were, overall, unconnected. However, the Industrial Revolution brought forth innovations in the fields of ground transportation, water transportation, communication, and industry, all of which are greatly important factors of a globalized world. First, with the invention of the railway system, countries were able to transport passengers and goods to other parts of the world. Furthermore, countries were more connected, which meant greater opportunities for transferring knowledge, new ideas, and proposals. Take a look at these statistics. In 1840, Austria-Hungary had a total of 144 kilometers of railway, but by 1900, it increased to 36,330 kilometers. France, 1840, only 496 kilometers of railway. By 1900, it increased to 38,109 kilometers. Germany, 1840, 469 kilometers. By 1900, 51,678. This was great news for countries on the same continent without any water barriers separating them. But what about countries that were separated by rivers, lakes, or even oceans? Once the steam engine was improved, it was utilized within the steamboat to allow easy mobilized transportation between water-separated countries. Imagine living in a world where the United States had no connection with China because of the Pacific Ocean. A third innovation that called for a figuratively smaller world was the invention of the telegraph. With the telegraph, people were able to communicate without seeing each other. They can be miles apart and still communicate. Without efficient modes of transportation and communication, countries would not share ideas, and most importantly, global markets would not be connected. Finally, the Industrial Revolution led to incredible increases in industry overall. For instance, this document shows that from the years of 1820 to 1824, the UK output 17.7 million metric tons of coal and lignite. But by 1900, it was outputting 230.4 million metric tons, an enormous improvement in the field of industry. Or what about this document? From 1825 to 1829, Germany output 90,000 metric tons of pig iron per year. But from 1900 to 1914, Germany was outputting 7,925,000 metric tons of the stuff each year on average. Finally, these statistics show yet another field to which the Industrial Revolution brought enormous success. In 1834, the UK had 10,000 cotton spindles. By 1877, 39,500 spindles. And by 1913, 55,700. Thankfully, the Industrial Revolution brought forth various inventions and ideas that allowed the process of globalization to be promoted. As societies began adopting these new innovations, many rural independent jobs were lost as factory jobs took over. However, as mentioned earlier, many people had been living in rural towns during this time, and this loss of jobs only meant trouble for them. In response, millions of people changed their lifestyle from rural to urban. The process of moving from small villages into cities is known as urbanization. With millions of people now trying to fit into urban cities, the world population was physically drawn closer, resulting in a more globalized world. Urbanization brought together people of different nationalities into a single place, and naturally caused many tensions. Eventually, groups of the same or similar ethnicities began to form, and this led to a period that hindered globalization. These groups developed certain beliefs of superiority over others, and as many groups did so, the period known as the rise of nationalism came into play. During this time, countries had been parts of larger empires, but with enough confidence, they would revolt and demand independence. All of a sudden, outbreaks across the globe began to take place. Haiti, Venezuela, Mexico, Brazil, Greece, France, Russia, and others all revolt in search of a common goal: freedom from a larger empire or ruler. In those instances when countries succeeded in achieving independence, the world grew figuratively larger. In other words, as countries or empires separate into smaller states, the world increases in size, and therefore contradicts the ideals of globalization. Furthermore, the simple idea that one country is far superior to all others hinders globalization. This is because the globalized world is a world in which countries are dependent on one another in various areas. It is most likely that nationalistic countries would want nothing to do with each other. They would be too immersed in national pride to allow their country to be dependent on other countries. The combination of the need for raw materials derived from the Industrial Revolution and the patriotic pride brought forth from the rise of nationalism led to a whole new period of history which, contrary to nationalism, greatly promoted globalization.